If I handed you $65,000 tonight and forced you to choose between buying a house or investing in the stock market, could you honestly tell me which one would actually make you richer? Not happier, not prouder, richer. Most people can't, and it's not a math problem. It's a perception problem. Stick around, because the answer might surprise you. Imagine you're this person. You're 34 years old. You've saved $65,000 through years of discipline. You earn a decent salary, nothing more. And tonight you have to decide what to do with that money. Two paths open up in front of you. I'm going to show you both as if you'd lived them both. On one path, you become Iana. On the other, you become Dwight. These aren't two different people. This is you, twice. The only difference between them is which box they checked that night. Iana takes her $65,000 and puts it down as a payment on a $325,000 house, a decent duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. She borrows the rest over 30 years at 7%. Her monthly payment lands around $1,730. She rents out the lower floor for $2,300 a month. On paper, that leaves her about $570 in margin every month. The day she signs the papers, Iana nearly cries. The keys are in her hand. She can touch the walls. She can tell her mother, "I bought a house." Dwight takes the same $65,000 and puts it into a broad index fund. No duplex, no keys, no tenant. He sets up an automatic transfer of $400 a month and closes the app. The day he does this, he feels nothing in particular. He looks at a screen, clicks confirm, and goes back to his evening. Here's the first important thing to understand. From day one, before a single dollar has even moved, Iana already feels richer than Dwight, not because she is, because her brain has physical proof it can touch, and his only has a notification. That's the first lie our brain tells us about money. We associate wealth with what we can see and touch, not with what actually holds the most value. For the first 2 years, Iana keeps feeling like she's winning. She collects her rent checks. She watches home prices in the neighborhood climb. She talks about her real estate portfolio at Christmas dinner, even though she only owns one property. Dwight, meanwhile, logs into his account once every couple of months. In year one, his $65,000 grows to about $71,000. In year two, roughly $78,000, monthly contributions included. Nobody at any dinner table ever asks him about it. Then comes Iana's first real setback, a leak in the basement. Repair cost, $2,100. Then a full month without a tenant while she looks for a new one. Loss, roughly $2,300 plus cleaning and listing fees. She still feels rich. But her actual account tells a different story. After these costs, her real net margin over those 2 years drops to about $3,000 total, not the $13,000 she thought she had banked going in. This is where the gap starts to open up between what Iana feels and what her numbers actually say. Let's step back for a moment and talk about the real numbers, the ones that don't depend on anyone's personal story. Over the last 60 to 90 years, the U.S. stock market, measured by the S&P 500, has returned on average around 10% a year, dividends included. U.S. residential real estate, over those same stretches of time, has returned on average somewhere between 4 and 5.5% a year in pure appreciation. On that number alone, stocks win, and by a wide margin. But here's what that number doesn't tell you. Iana only put down $65,000 of her own money to control a $325,000 asset. That's leverage. If her house appreciates by just 4% a year, that gain applies to the full $325,000, not just her down payment. Once you adjust for that, the real return on the cash she personally put in, what's called cash on cash return, can climb to somewhere around 15 to 20% in some years on paper. Dwight has none of that leverage. Every dollar of his gain comes purely from his own money, with no debt to amplify it. So who's actually winning? It depends entirely on how you count. And that's exactly what makes this comparison so dangerous. Both sides are right, depending on how they choose to present their own numbers. Let's fast forward to year 10. Iana's duplex, bought for $325,000, is now worth roughly $440,000. She still owes about $210,000 on her mortgage. Her equity on that property sits around $230,000. Over those 10 years, once every real cost is subtracted, taxes, insurance, repairs, nearly a month of vacancy almost every year, a roof replacement that costs $9,000, her actual net cash profit lands somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000. Dwight's portfolio, with his $400 monthly contributions and an average 10% return, sits at roughly $210,000 to $225,000. They're once again in the same ballpark, almost tied. But if you asked Iana and Dwight separately who feels richer, there's no contest. Iana. She has a property, a title, walls she can stand in. Dwight has a PDF statement he opens 3 times a year. And this is where it gets interesting, because that feeling isn't just harmless. It changes the decisions each of them makes next. Dwight's risk is easy to name: volatility. In 2008, the market dropped more than 35% within months. In 2020, an almost equally brutal crash happened within weeks. If Dwight had panicked and sold at either of those moments, he would have locked in those losses forever. That's the classic risk of markets: fear pushing you to sell at exactly the wrong time. Iana's risk is quieter, but just as real. Because she feels rich on paper, she's tempted to borrow against her home's value to fund another project, a renovation, or a second property. If the market turns right at that moment, she can end up owing more than her house is actually worth. Her risk isn't panic. It's overconfidence. Two opposite emotions, two different traps, and neither one has anything to do with the actual numbers. Here's the part almost nobody says out loud in this debate. The real financial risk of an entire lifetime isn't the market crashing. It isn't the tenant who stops paying either. It's confusing what you feel with what you actually own, and making your financial decisions based on the first instead of the second. Iana isn't richer because she feels richer. Dwight isn't poorer because he feels nothing when he logs into his account. Their emotions don't measure anything at all. They're just reactions to what can be seen and touched, not to what actually holds value. And that's exactly where most people go wrong, not in choosing between bricks and stocks, but in letting how they feel in the moment make the decision for them in either direction. So if one day you have $65,000 in front of you and you have to choose, here's the only real question to ask yourself before you even think about returns or risk. Am I choosing based on what this money will actually become in 10 or 20 years? Or am I choosing based on what will make me feel rich tonight at that dinner in front of those people? Those two questions almost never have the same answer. And you, before watching this video, what would you have picked? Tell me in the comments. What has always made you feel more secure, real estate or stocks? And do you think that feeling has actually served you well? If this video changed how you see the question, subscribe. I make more like this every week.